Hi, we're sisters Brenda and Elaine.
Welcome to the Body Wealth Podcast, a space for conversations about the wealth that really matters.
Your best health. This episode is a winner. I learned so much from Tracey. She's a mother who's raising 2 sons on the autism spectrum and doing so much more.
Yeah, she is a busy woman and she is helping her family and she's supporting them in amazing ways. And she's also finding ways to support other families.
Well, let's let our listeners hear some of Tracey's wisdom.
Thank you for joining us, Tracey. So good to see you. And we are happy to have this conversation with you today. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I'm excited about this opportunity to speak with the two of you. So thank you.
Okay, very good. Why don't you take a few minutes just to introduce yourself to our guests this morning?
Sure. So, Tracey Hawkins, and I reside in the beautiful Bull City, Durham, North Carolina. I like to say I am a wife, mom, entrepreneur, and constantly trying to find the balance with it all, which I feel like a lot of women and moms, that is something we're constantly trying to do.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the demands on your life?
Yeah, so I think you said it. Just having two younger boys, both have autism. They're ages 7 and 9, Adam and James Preston. And it is, as we always talk about autism within the community, it is a marathon and definitely not a sprint. One day can be an amazing day. You feel like, you knocked it out of the ballpark. Um, not as many meltdowns. You're able to help your little ones regulate their emotions. And then you have those days where, as me and my husband like to say, where the autism just won. The autism and the age of the young kids just won today, and let's just try for a better day tomorrow. One of the things I'm trying to do a better job of, like I said, it's always a work in progress, is not to stay in the depths of, wow, this is really hard, right?
Mm.
And I can find myself going down that rabbit hole, right? And just try to chuck it up like it's a day. We got them down, they're asleep. Let's pray that they have a restful night's sleep, and let's just sit here and breathe. Let's try again tomorrow. Let's put this day to rest, and let's start afresh tomorrow because we cannot return to this.
So, how did you get to this diagnosis for both of your sons of finding out that they had autism?
So I would say I was a bit slow coming to terms with the reality of my son's needs and disability. Um, and it was really my husband that was kind of like, let's let's just see. It's good to know. And I was just in that sense of that space of, I don't want that label on my son. I don't know what this means for his future. What is this going to do? Is this going to harm him in some way? Think about where we were or where we continue to be, right, as a society when it comes to our young Black males. It was very, I was scared. I was afraid.
What was
So
going
I
on with
did
him
not
that
want,
made you seek that, the medical
yeah.
attention?
So I would say 2017, we started noticing the delays in speech where James Preston, he had words like, if I don't know, by the age of 2 or 3, you should have like what, 75 to 150 words, right? Whatever that
Mhm.
range is. James Preston was always on the lower end of the range.
Okay.
So he wasn't developing his words at the rate of other kids in his class, like preschool at that time. I spoke to his teacher, or I spoke to his pediatrician at the time, and she thought that, it's language. Language sometimes is one of those things where every child develops it at their own rate, not to think too much about it. But then emotionally, it would be small things that would cause him to be very disruptive to him and his behavior. And then eventually it was his preschool teacher that said, she really encouraged us to kind of go and have him assess for, at that time, they were saying sensory processing challenges.
Mhm.
Um, so we went, and it's, depending on where you live, it can take anywhere from 6 months to up to 2 years to begin the process of getting your son's, or your child, assessed for autism. So we started the process in the fall of that year,
Wow.
because emotionally it was still a lot. I mean, things would happen where uh, if he would open up like a granola bar and the granola bar would break in half as he was opening it, that was very disruptive to him, right? And that would cause him to go into 20, 30, up to 45 minutes of a meltdown where he is
Mm,
screaming, yelling, flinging his body in
mm.
the air. And as you can imagine,
Yeah.
that's hard to see as a mom, right?
Right.
Uh, and then for, I would say, Adams' symptoms were quite different, right? Where he just stopped speaking. So he would go 2 or 3 months without saying any
Wow.
word. And emotionally, it wasn't the same as James Preston, but it was almost like he was withdrawing away from us, right? And
Mhm.
things that we were saying or trying to engage him with, he had no interest. Um, and like I said, he just stopped speaking, wouldn't respond to his name. And because we were already in the process of having James Preston assessed, I said, okay, here we go again. You
Mm.
could not do this a second time, right, God? Like, this has got to be a joke.
Right.
So those are kind of the signs and symptoms we saw within both of the boys.
So you said initially you maybe resisted is too strong a word, but initially you weren't
Mm.
embracing the diagnosis. So what caused you to go from maybe resistance to embracing?
Yeah, so I would say you could definitely say I was resistant. I think that would sum it up. And now I would say it's really the more you learn about anything, the better you are, right? And in the very beginning, once I came to terms, once I received the diagnosis, one of the first things I wanted to do was to connect with people within the community, right? I wanted to hear from not just parents that had autistic kids, but I wanted to connect with other teenagers or children, and adults that had autism to better understand what it's like, right? Because, at that point, my boys were, and they still, right, had these challenges with communication and social dialogue and kind of engagement. And I wanted to better understand from them what I need to be doing as a parent, right? Like, what was the thing most helpful to them? And I think it was really that the autism community, the self advocates within the community that really helped me to get to where I am. I am a parent that is I'm not ashamed. I'm not, I don't try to hide the diagnosis of my kids. I allow them to be who they are and all their beautifulness and their wonderment and all of that. Um, I'm not as anxious or nervous about what other people will think anymore. And I fully accept it, right? I fully accept the diagnosis and all that is open to them because of the help of the self advocates that help me to see how fulfilling their world and their lives are. Um, and not needing a parent to serve as this like, um, their voice for them always, right? Really encouraging my kids if they, are ready and they can for them to be their advocates and for me to support them in the needs that they have.
So I was wondering two things. How long did that process take for you to go from resistance to embracing? And sounds like you really support your children well. And I think all parents want to do that and have to do it in different ways, but it maybe takes a toll on you personally
Oh,
as a mom. And
absolutely.
how does that affect you, and who supports you, or what helps you to sort of get through those hard moments?
I would say it probably took a good year to a year and a half, to kind of start getting that footing, right? And start getting my sea legs, as people say. Um, because it was hard, right? It was so many emotions caught up within those diagnoses, right? That you hear about your children, and already I also had the emotions of my husband and I. We had challenges holding on to our pregnancies, right? So we
Mm.
encountered 3 miscarriages, and then having 2 kids, and then learning that these 2 kids had disabilities. It's a lot emotionally, right? That you have to kind of come to terms with and accept. Um, and for me, another thing that helped is one of the agencies here in our state, North Carolina, when I reached out to them as I was getting my footing, said, okay, what is it that I need to do? Because one of my dear friends and kind of mentors from graduate school, as I was in my, space of just having a really hard time coming to terms with things, he said, every day that you delay having them access and getting them the therapies that they need is another day that you're not meeting their needs.
Mm.
And within our community, that's something we've got to do better with. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. And I said, okay, now like that's what I needed to hear to kind of get this going. So I started reaching out to some of the local agencies and statewide agencies. I really feel like we have a nice village from therapists to caregivers to loved ones and so forth and so on that really helped us get to where we are in this journey. But as you said, Elaine, there's definitely days where it gets tiring, right? It's hard when you're having to manage and navigate the educational system.
Mm.
Um, when you're having to you see the changes happening in your children or your child, and you just kind of don't know what you need, like those moments where you just don't know what to do, right? One of the things I started recently doing is meditating.
Mm.
And it's funny because 17 years ago I was introduced to meditation and mindful eating, but at that time in my early 20s, who needed that, right? At that time
Life was
I didn't
perfect,
have the
right?
same. Life was great, right? I was dating Zach. It was fun, right? So I really didn't, understand the value or really have an appreciation for meditation until this fall, when things just really seemed to take their toll on me physically and emotionally. And I said, okay, I've got to figure out some better coping strategies. And I turned back to meditation in an odd way. One of my friends had mentioned an app that she was using. And I said, okay, well, let me try it, right? I already have it, I already subscribed to it. Let me just give it a whirl. And it took that one day for me to do a 5-minute meditation. Then now I start my day with meditation. Before the boys come home, I do another
Mm.
meditation. And then at the end of each night, I've even gotten me and Zach, we'll do like a couples meditative state
Nice.
together. So it's been nice just kind of finding things that can refuel me in the midst of all of this.
That's fantastic. And I've tried meditating and I've heard the term monkey mind where my brain just pop, 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 pop. So is this app something that helps you not do that, or did it take some time before you were able to really get into the meditation without your mind popping all over the place?
So I think that's just it. Like when you first, like back when I first learned about meditation, they said that your mind can wander and that's okay. Like gently bring your mind back to
Mm.
your state. Like there are so many things that I don't have control over, right? But
Right.
what is it that I do have control over? And then just really grounding myself in the things that refuel me and having to take time to figure that out. Um, and making sure I honor myself and put myself first so I can be there for my husband, my kids, work, everything else. But like you said, it takes some time, right?
Right.
I look at it as that's my time for me. It is 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes where this is only about Tracy. I don't have to worry about the phone ringing. Like everything else is paused. And it's going to be paused until I have this time for myself. So, really honoring those moments for myself is what I've had to learn how to do.
So I think that's great. I'm glad that you came to that while your sons are still relatively young. I think I came to that a little bit later. But um, why don't you give us a sense of your typical day? Like, what are you managing?
Yeah. Well, I do want to quickly say I had to hit my brick wall, right? I didn't come into motherhood like, ooh, self care is the most important thing. I
Yeah.
think things happen in our life that really we have to center and we have to ground ourselves again to say, okay, I've got to put some things into perspective. I've got to prioritize better because my current rate and my current pace, I'm not going to make it here on this earth long, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
had to hit my brick wall to realize all that I'm saying now. So it wasn't like, oh, I've been doing this for years. Like, not at all.
What was that brick wall?
So my brick wall was, I would say it was my son's motherhood helped me hit that brick wall,
Okay.
right? And just, I would say the needs of my kids, my youngest one in particular, really got to a level where it was all consuming, right? It was, I would wake up in the morning and it was all about Adam and his needs. And I was hearing from the schools every single day. And it wasn't great reports, right? So hearing all this stuff and you hear your child who's struggling, that's hard emotionally, right?
Mm.
And you can see it when he gets home from school. You can see how uh, upset he is, right? And you're just trying to understand what happened in the day. So then you're trying to be a detective and figuring out the day. So it was just the stress of parenting, not just a child, but a child with a disability that was just at an all-time high. And again, my brick wall, it was pretty traumatic of a situation where I just had zoned out. I was thinking about the day. It was a hard, hard day for my son. He um, had been restrained at school for 47 minutes, which is unheard of, right?
Yeah.
Um, on top of being suspended. So it was just a lot. Still, like, this is still fresh, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I was at a stoplight, um, and I had zoned out. And I didn't realize that the stoplight I was at was that of a railroad crossing. And I had just kind of zoned out, just thinking about the day, just in those deep kind of like a daydream almost,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And thinking about all the phone calls over the course of the day, the conversations, the next steps, what I need to do. I can't believe I'm here, all these conversations and thinking about my child, right? At the center of all of this is a 7-year-old baby.
Right.
Um, and I heard the alarm for the train coming. And I quickly looked and I said, oh my God, I'm on a train track. And I'm thinking, I'm mad at myself, like, oh my God, what's going on? But I'm also like, I got to get off this train track. Um, and my car stalled. I could not get off that train track. I don't know what happened. I can't figure it out to this day, right? But I jumped out the car, of course, and then the train came and took the car, and
Oh
that was
goodness.
my brick wall.
Yeah.
And I said, okay.
Something's got to
Once
change.
I was able to come to, it took, like, it was
Right.
on a Friday. So it took that whole weekend where it was just so unbelievable, right? Like, I can't believe all that my son is going through. I can't believe all that's happening. And I can't believe I've gotten myself to the space where I don't even realize that I'm parked on a train track.
Mm. We are
Like,
so happy that you are okay. That
amen to that.
yeah, I mean,
But it's just
it's that was a big wake-up call.
a, a huge, like I said, that when something that big happens, you have to. It's either, okay, I've got to change the way I'm handling. I've got to find better ways to cope with this stress because my son is 7. The autism isn't going away, right?
Right.
He's going to grow and he's going to develop, yes, but the autism is going to stay there. And we're always going to find ourselves in the midst of some challenge or something that we need to, help him or one of them with. But the way that I'm currently navigating, I need to be here. I need to be present with them. They need me. My husband needs me, right? Like the way.
That's hard because navigating school is hard enough. We know as mothers of Black sons, it's hard because they're not always viewed the way we view them. So
Right.
this is a whole nother level of additional stress. And I know how connected we as mothers are to our children, and what they go through affects us
Mhm.
seriously. So what have you done? What have you figured since then to sort of keep yourself in the place that you need to be for yourself and for your sons?
Yeah. So I would say hold people accountable to what they are supposed to do. Um, I feel like I do a great job of delegating and not trying to take it all on. One of the things I was constantly doing was, oh, when I'm engaging with the school system, whomever is like, okay, well, I'll do this. I'll come here. I'll do this. I'll figure this out. And one of my good girlfriends, who is actually a therapist, kept saying, like, that's not your responsibility. Like, why would the teacher do
Uh,
this if you're going to keep doing it? Like, you're doing her job. And I was like, oh my God, I
uh,
am. Right. And then just realizing the roles, right? Like, that is your role. I am here to advocate for my son. I am here to make sure you all are meeting his needs, the needs that by law you have to. And I make sure you're doing it in a way that supports him. Right. And then doing those body scans, right? Checking in with myself, right? Grounding myself back in my faith, reminding myself of what I actually have control over and what I don't. Um, and it's almost like you're going back to the basics of what you've always been told, but it's so simple that it's almost too hard to do, if that makes sense, right?
yeah.
It's it's so easy to just let go and let God, but our free will and our own personality types is like, but no, 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 I can handle this one, God. I'll take this one. You manage the other thing. Like,
Mhm.
you take care of that. I'll do this.
That's right.
And
You gave
just
me the skills to handle
again,
this.
that's it. Knowing my lane. My husband, he would always say that when we were in the midst of planning our wedding. Um, we would have our different tasks that we had to do, right? And he would always say, "You can't come into my lane and try to manage what I'm doing. You need to stay in your lane and manage what you're doing." So it's that stays true of just staying in my lane, not trying to merge, not trying to go on the shoulder to help anybody, like, and
Right.
put on my warning sign. No, staying in my lane and managing what I am to be managing.
That's great. That's a great image too to keep you focused on that. It sounds like you have a community that supports you, and I'm curious, how did you find or build that community?
The more vocal that I was about my children and their disabilities, the more I started hearing from other parents. Where
Mm.
in the beginning, I didn't see too many African American families, Black families talking about autism, right? So I had this shame, this fear, like, oh, don't tell anybody. We can't tell anybody, right? Let's not go anywhere. Or going in grocery stores and having to leave in the midst of, if my son was having a hard time. Um, and the more I started opening up about my son's diagnosis, the more I would hear and connect with other families. And people would say, oh, you should really talk to this mom. I think y'all have some commonalities, right? Some similarities. So that was really helpful, right? And kind of getting, helping me on my journey, right? Getting myself, like I would say, from underneath the mattress when I was just depressed, right? With the
Right.
gravity of it all. Um, and yeah, that's how it started. Just sharing more and more and opening up with other people and families about our family.
Well, I know you have used that to try to help other families with some of the work that you've done now. Can you tell us a little bit about your Thriving on the Spectrum app that you've created?
Yeah, so I'm really excited to go from where I was shamed and didn't want to tell anybody about my sons and their diagnosis to now sitting here with an app with no tech background, no business background, but a mom that really saw there was a way that we could really kind of help our family and other families streamline the process of helping kids and really adults and individuals in general manage their day. So it was probably, like I said, in 2019 where I had the idea in 2018 when they were both getting diagnosed, um, because we had this notebook or I think it's right over here. This visual planning notebook, and it's these little like 2 by 2 pet cards, and they were kids, a lot of kids with autism, or I should say some kids with autism. The way that they learn language is through a visual representation, right? So if they saw the card that said toilet with like a toilet on it, they would know like, oh, I go to the toilet in the morning, right? I use the bathroom in the morning. This is a picture of me washing my hands. That's what I do after I use the bathroom, and then I brush my teeth. Like, so we had mapped out each part of their day, right? These visual schedules that we would do the night before in preparation for the next day. So they would know what their day was going to entail. Um, so these little cards, it was a lot to keep up with, right?
Right.
A family on the go. We had Durham County has probably all kind of cards from James Preston and Adam's deck just all over the place because I couldn't manage it. And I thought, there's got to be a better way in 2018 that we're sitting here helping kids and individuals understand their schedule. And I'm thinking, our schedule's digital. Why can't they have a digital schedule, right? And it was, to my surprise, the way that I wanted the app to be, like to streamline communication between therapists and families and teachers, um, to have a digital schedule, to have the visual representation attached to that card, and do the reminders. It wasn't all in one place. I was having to download different apps or use different resources to go about doing the same thing. And I thought, this would be really cool if we could kind of bring it all together. And like I said, to my surprise, it wasn't already out there. So again, no tech, no business background, but realizing this is a need. And let me just pitch it out to self advocates within the community to see if they think it's a good idea, if they think it's something that would make sense, that would be useful, right? So I did that. And each time I would pitch to another self advocate, they would say, okay, well, how can I download this? I would love to start using this now. And I would say, well, no, 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 no. I don't even have the money. This is just an idea that's all up in the air. So to go from there in 2018 and 2019 to now having a mobile version of our app in the App Store, on the Google Play and iOS App Store, it's really exciting, and I can't believe it. Again, from where I was to where I am now, it is truly a journey.
And it sounds like, this is a gift to many other families. It's something you use, but, it's almost like your life purpose to be able to help other families with children on the autism spectrum.
Yeah, and just I really do feel like now, Brendan, that you said that, how you said that, I do now feel like I have found my purpose, right? I have found something that really nourishes and refuels me in the midst of everything, right?
Mhm.
Like this is my mission. This is the purpose that I am to serve. So yeah.
That's great. You mentioned sort of being a Black family, and I'm wondering if you see any differences being a Black family with children on the autism spectrum, or how is that a part of your story?
But I would say we're not always the families that are represented in culture, right? In the society. When you hear about autism, it's almost like it's always brought across as either this mid to high SES kind of class, white suburban family with a little boy that has it, that loves dinosaurs. And it's like,
Right. This is
that's
their issue,
so
right?
like, right, right. Like that is such a small subset of this spectrum, right? You can easily go to the movie theater and there is sensory friendly viewing of movies, or you can go to a show and they have the noise canceling headphones, right? We've been fortunate to have really good insurance that what my kids need is covered. But in the
Mm.
very beginning, we didn't, right? And it was based on what our employers provided, which you can't change, right? I tried to, and I was kind of met with a real quick, swift, like, yeah, no, 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 this isn't changing. But there was a time where Adam he was only able to have, based on the insurance that we had at the time, he was only going to be able to have 10 speech therapy appointments within a calendar year.
Wow.
And at that time, Adam was having speech twice a week.
Wow.
So when I learned, they received the diagnosis and, we got our kind of roadmap to therapies. And I learned that, oh, well, he can only do 10 appointments. So you want to just do therapy like once a month. I thought, well, that doesn't even make sense. Like, he has
Right.
a communication disorder, and you're telling me that he can only see a speech therapist 10 times a year? So
Less than
then
once a month. Less than once a month.
less less than once a month, right? So then you have to make that decision. Are you going to pay out of pocket? Like you were
Mhm.
saying, like it gets pricey having to pay out of pocket for that year all the therapies, and you're having to make choices like, okay, well, do we need to go twice a week? Can we do once a week? Can we maybe make
Right.
the appointment instead of two 30-minute appointments? Can we do a 45-minute appointment or a 60-minute appointment? Like these are all the kind of questions that you have to start thinking about and asking when you have limited resources, right? And because they had the autism diagnosis, they were able to start school sooner than another
Mhm.
child, right? So they were able to get within the public school system, within the exceptional children's department sooner so they can start going ahead and meeting their needs earlier, right? So, because early intervention is critical. And I would say
Mhm.
our county does a really good job of getting the kids seen, assessed, and really kind of again mapping us to the necessary services and therapies that they need. You can look at the stats and you see that the rate of kids receiving that autism diagnosis when it comes to black and brown kids, they are receiving the diagnosis later. So they've missed those
Mhm.
critical, moments where, 2, 3, 4, 5, where you can get that really good, and still rewire that brain almost to kind of really open up and understand the different therapies that they're learning. We're missing out on within our black and brown communities, and we're getting the diagnosis later. Sometimes we're not even getting the diagnosis. We're getting the diagnosis of like a behavior disorder.
Yeah.
Um, because I know James Preston would have definitely gotten the behavior disorder and not that of autism if it wasn't for the help of people who are truly knowledgeable about autism and seeing kind of the signs and symptoms and not just focusing on the behaviors, but what the function of that behavior is. I think is
Mhm.
very important.
To some extent, in our community, if there's a stigma about being labeled with something, then we're not going to look into it or we're going to be mislabeled, like you said. And so I think I'm really excited that we're talking to you because it will encourage people to realize, as you said, the sooner you get the diagnosis, the sooner you can serve and support your children and give
Absolutely.
them what they need.
Absolutely.
So we got to get rid of
Because
these
there's
stigmas.
so we do, because there's so much out there. I mean, I was connected to parent support groups. Through those parent support groups, it was other parents that was like, "Oh, have you heard of this? Do you know about this therapy?" And I was like, "What? Like, they do what?" And just
Mhm.
really, like you said, just understanding what's out there, the stigmas that within our community about your child having an IEP, which is individual education program or something like that, but
Mhm.
IEP, the stigma related to having that, and parents not wanting their kids to have an IEP. Where I'm like, nope, I want an IEP. That is a legally binding contract that
Yes.
you have to honor. You have to meet the needs of my son. This is what they are. I mean, just really understanding what resources our kids can have so they can thrive in any environment. And that's really how the idea, the name of the app, the Thrive app, came about. It's because I knew that my kids could thrive and individuals in general, right, could thrive in any environment with the right resources and
Yeah.
support. And
Right.
that's what we
Support.
hope to be able to do with our app. I would say once they get within the educational department, it's almost like that's when the real work almost begins, where you are going to have to advocate for your baby like never before. And I just think our public education system, our biggest, I would say, challenge that it faces is being understaffed,
Mm.
overworked, and not truly trained and knowledgeable about the different disabilities that our children have. So when
Yeah.
you have a teacher that doesn't understand the spectrum, the full spectrum of autism, and you're tired, you're overworked, and I get home, I get worksheets sent home, this was in the past, of just tracing worksheets where my son has done nothing but trace letters and numbers when I know that there's more in there. You got to fight that battle, right? Because that's I'm not sending you. You're not my child's babysitter. You're my
Right.
child.
Dream bigger for
Yes,
them.
yes,
Yes.
yes. Dream bigger. Know that there's so much more than what meets the eye. And your role as a teacher, parent, whatever, is for you to understand their way of learning. It's for you to understanding their way of communicating.
So, what is or are your hopes for Adam and James Preston as adults?
I would say for them to have a happy and fulfilling life doing exactly what they want to do and not feeling like they need to meet anyone's expectations but their own.
Yay.
And that's
Uh,
it.
we hope that as well.
Beyond meditation, what
Uh-huh.
else do you do to replenish yourself?
Oh, ground myself in the promises of the Lord.
Hmm. Hmm.
Hmm. Ground myself in his promises of what he has said, and then remind him and myself of those promises. Again, it's those basic things, right? Drinking my water, making sure I am replenishing myself, right? Whether it is through spiritual or like actual nutrients, right? Knowing that I've got to have the fuel and the energy.
So, first, who or what inspires you to work towards your own best health?
Mhm.
I would say the women in my family, because I feel like I've got some strong shoulders that I stand on. My mother, my grandmother, my great grandmother before she passed, um, my husband, uh, and my kids. Right, like seeing their resiliency to go every single day out in a society that is not built for them, but yet they still navigate it and have moments where they can smile and laugh. Come on.
Mm.
Clearly, I can
Mhm.
too, right?
Yay. Yeah.
Great motivation, right?
Hmm.
Good, good. Nice to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to call Tracey Superwoman because I am so impressed. I know she won't agree with that characterization, but the way she takes such good care of her sons, her family, now herself, thankfully, and also starting an app, this Thriving on the Spectrum app that's helping so many other families.
Yeah, she is amazing. And one thing that I took from this conversation was the fact that early intervention is really important. If we think there's something going on with our children, it's important to go ahead and find out for sure. A lot of times we just want to pretend like it'll go away on its own or ignore it. And sometimes it does, but that is not always the case. And if we have the information, we can serve our children better.
And the other thing I took away from Tracey is the need to hold people accountable for fulfilling their responsibilities to your children. So she saw herself as a ringmaster where she wasn't trying to do it all, but she was making sure her sons were getting the care they needed by making sure people were doing what they were supposed to do for them. And I thought that was a really important point because that's how she allows herself to have the time to also care for herself so she doesn't hit that brick wall, so she doesn't burn herself out. Thanks for listening. We hope this episode inspires you to increase your body wealth. If you like our show, please subscribe and tell a friend. For resources related to this topic, please see the show notes. And be sure to follow us on Instagram at Body Wealth Sisters.
The Body Wealth podcast shares personal stories to inspire you. It does not constitute medical advice. For that, we encourage you to work with a trusted healthcare provider. We also want to remind you that the views expressed by our guests are their own. This podcast is dedicated to our mother, Jean Fernandez Barbour, who showed us what advocating for yourself really looks like.